Welcome. Oh man. Oh, yeah, so I'm really looking forward to this conversation here today as more gentlemen are going to be coming on and as I'm really looking forward to this exchange, right? And someone asked me earlier, there was like equity. What are you talking about equity? Like what kind of equity are you talking about? Business equity? No, we're talking about equity as a whole, right? Alan, man, how you doing, man?
I'm pretty good, man. I'm really happy about this tonight, man. I'm really looking forward to it.
Good. So now you are in Brooklyn right now, right?
I am not.
Oh,
But I had spent 7 years in the Virgin Islands. I left Brooklyn. I went to the VI and was slaving for 7 years, working on businesses, companies, startups. And then I went back to New York, and that's when we connected. So I'm back in the Virgin Islands right now, just tying up some loose ends.
nice. So now that means that you wake up to the beach every morning and I wake up to snow, right? Yeah, like is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Thank you for being so polite with that, man. Welcome everyone. As more gentlemen are about to come on, I'm super excited about this conversation here today, where we're speaking about equity, right? And we're going to be covering a whole lot today, and it's a free flowing conversation. So please feel free to add questions, comments in the chat. And it's really a conversation about the current state of our community, and also where is it that we look to take our community. And when I say community, I'm not only talking gentleman's factor, I'm talking about the Black community as a whole, right? So now how do we envision the world that we want to live in, and also how do we envision the world that we want our children and our children want to live in, right? And the last couple of so perhaps maybe the last year, there's been so many things being said about the Black community, and corporations are pledging, and everyone is talking about new initiatives, etc. And we want to have that conversation here today, right? So before we start, I want to show you all a brief interview that I had last year on Yahoo Finance, which would shape the conversation, right? So I'm about to share my screen real quick, and let's take it. Do you guys see my screen or no? Alan, do you see the screen? Yeah, like I want to make sure.
No, not yet.
Okay.
Not yet.
All right. Okay, good. So, okay. All right. Do you see the screen now?
Yeah. I see it. Yahoo Finance.
Yep. All right, perfect. So, yep. Here it goes right here. We are really looking, to ensure that wherever we are in our career paths, that we are placed in a position to dominate and then also to scale, because we also need the same opportunities as everyone else.
Jeff, you talked about companies now talking about dollars and what they can actually do to sort of commit to moving the needle. But you've talked before about some of the startups, the success stories that have come out of your organization, and VCs traditionally have not funded a lot of these minority-owned startups. Have you seen that change at all? Are you getting more calls? What are you hearing on that side?
Oh, well, so we're happy that companies are now pledging, saying that they're, pledging hundreds of millions of, $1 billion, etc. But now, we need to see exactly where that money goes, right? Because right now, there's protesting and, people are really upset and, everyone is saying Black Lives Matter. Then there's the pledge. But now we also need to see the results 6 months from now, a year from now. And then one thing that corporate America needs to understand, and the world needs to understand, is that Black and brown people can't unlearn what we've just experienced. So we've seen that within a span of 2 weeks, we literally moved the world. So if we don't see the results again, then they'll then now rally back up so that we can get the results, right? So it's good that there's pledges, but we're evaluating where we'll be 6 months from now, a year from now. And I believe that if the community is not happy with the satisfaction, then we'll be marching again.
Jeff, it's Brian Chung. You talked about access and opportunity for your members, but that's also a running theme, I believe.
Oh, right. So, yeah, right. That was some strong words. That was some strong words that this guy, Jeff Lindor, said. And Jeff Lindor's still alive. They didn't kidnap me yet. No, okay, let me stop. That was some strong words. So then I guess the question that I want to, and then just on some context, that interview was, again, at the height of the Black Lives Matter protest. I'd say perhaps maybe that was in June-ish or so. And then I'll put the link in the chat so that for those who haven't seen it yet, you can see it in its fullness. So, Alan, the question that I have is, where are we 6 months from now, 1 year from now, right? Everyone was, marching, pledging, some of, our white colleagues, perhaps maybe, someone's boss was out there marching with them, right? You know what I mean? Now, what were the results that came out of that, or if anything, or are we satisfied?
Man, so dude, that's a I don't know, man. Like, so the reality is that I think the impact that has had, have we seen changes? Probably not, but the issue runs really deep, man. So it's not something that could change overnight. What I do appreciate about it is that more people realize that the problem is real. It's like everyone knows 1 + 1 = 2. More people know that there is definitely racial inequality in America. Like, it's a fact now. Like, it's a fact. Like, you have McKinsey, I can't even count the number of reports that they've issued about the wealth gap, about racial inequality, with the pandemic. It's a fact. It's impacted more people of color than non-Black people. So what I appreciate at least is that it's not a debate about if it exists. It's a conversation about what we do about it.
Right. Yeah, I mean, what I would say is that, corporations, and like I think we even created this spreadsheet of how many corporations pledged, millions, tens of millions, even billions of dollars. And I think that it was cool. But what I'm finding, though, is that with a lot of the corporations, when they pledged all of this money, the question now is, all right, so what's the next step? How do we access it, right? What's the blueprint? And then what I've been finding as I have friends in various corporate entities, they don't have an actual dedicated staff that you go to for this, right? It's a committee, right? Now, if it's a committee, and as you know, for you, Alan, and so many people here who worked in corporate America, if there's not a dedicated staffer, there's a line item. Your job is to solve this, right? And you're evaluated on this, and there's key metrics, KPIs, etc. And if it's just an initiative, then it ain't that serious, right?
Yeah, and to add to that, since George Floyd, I started to really look deeper into diversity and inclusion. The reality is that most of the people that hold those roles don't even have a budget. Like, how can you make an impact at your company if you don't even have a budget? So in business, if it's not measured, it's not going to happen. And,
Exactly.
I think these are some of the things that I appreciate recently that have surfaced. There's less people that want to be diversity and inclusion officers because they don't really have the power to make any changes.
Yep.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
Like, so yeah. So again, back to my original statement, like, these are some of the things that at least now that have surfaced to make us all a little more aware of the reality of the situation.
Yeah. I mean, and then like going back to corporations, there are some corporations that are taking it seriously, and then there are some that are just like whatever, right? So, like as I told you this, Alan, last week, and then I'll even make it public. So, I sit on this committee now for the owners of the Brooklyn Nets, right? And in that, they pledged $50 million last year. You can Google it. They pledged $50 million. So then now they formed the committee. Oh my God, they formed the committee. But this committee is serious, though, right? This committee is serious because I'm on it, right? You know what I mean? No, right? So they formed this committee, and they, so in this committee, though, we had a conversation last week, and the conversation was, and this was with the owners, right? So how do we really deploy this money? And then one of the things that I said in the conversation was, hey, you know what? It's important. I mean, thank you for the $50 million that they want to give to Black businesses in Brooklyn. But what I also recommended was that in addition to the money, let's make sure that the Black businesses that you fund also is a part of the supply chain at the Barclays Center, right? So at the Barclays, because remember, BSC Global owns the Barclays Center. They also own the Brooklyn Nets, right? They also own, all of the development around there. So in addition to providing small businesses in Brooklyn, small Black businesses in Brooklyn with the capital, it's also then, making sure that they're a part of the that they are a part of the supply chain. So that means who is washing Kevin Durant's jerseys, right? You know what I mean? Who is the one who was the food supply? So it's like those things in addition to the capital. But Alan, I want to ask you this question though, right? So as it relates to technology, right? So in this technological advancement of the world, etc., do you see technology as a way of, solving these racist tactics, or can technology even be racist?
Well, absolutely, technology can be racist if it discriminates against, certain races. Facial recognition technology doesn't work with Black and brown faces as effectively as it does with non-Black faces. If that rolls out globally, that's a problem for us, right? So, but I think that technology has to be used to solve problems. So yeah, racism is a problem, but exactly, let's peel that back. I mean, what exactly is the problem? Like, what exactly is the problem? Like, so how is it impacting just our community? Like everyone on this call, all the members of the Gentleman's Factory, what are the challenges and the obstacles and the barriers that we have to break down to achieve equity, to achieve racial equity? Jeff, we've talked about this, and I've studied this, and equity means that everyone has a fair shake, right? It means the American dream is the same for everybody. To me, one of the big problems is that, but the American dream has been like this zero-sum game. What zero sum? What does that mean? That means in order for me to win, somebody else has to lose. That's what zero sum means. So I've heard Biden say this, which I was really impressed when he said that. So American dream cannot mean that in order for me to win, somebody else has to lose. That has to be pushed to the side, bro. Like, so, but the problem we're having is that all the institutions that Americans rely on these things were created in a different era.
Right.
And they still exist today without ever being transformed. So we're stuck in this reality. You know, we may be hitting the streets and protesting and marching, but the reality is that the institutions that govern, protect, and rule our lives were created hundreds of years ago, which we know what that era was like. So at the end of the day, equity means status quo has to die.
That's a fact. That's a fact.
Who's ready? Who is ready for that? That's the question. Who is ready for that, right? So, and then what do we do in the meantime? Like, so the majority of Americans have to realize that status quo needs to change. I don't know. I mean, maybe that'll happen. Maybe that won't. But man, this is what we're dealing with here in America. This is what we're dealing with.
What's interesting is that McKinsey put out a study where it said that if there, was a, if like racism, or if you give more Black people opportunities, it would, add trillions of dollars into the economy, right? So, this scarcity mindset with other ethnic groups, I think it's a fear of not necessarily equality, but it's a fear of, if you really give Black folks power, will they, remember what happened in the past? Rustin wrote asked a really good question, right? And he says, how do you push for measurement without getting the angry Black guy mockery, right? So how do you do that, right? I have my thoughts, man, but what are your thoughts?
Well, I think that you need to be able to show there needs to be opportunities for the angry Black guy. Then he'll be less angry. The reason why he's angry is because he's trying to feed his family. He's trying to just live a life. He's an American citizen. He's trying to live the American dream, but he's oppressed. And the institutions that he's relying on for services, for loans, for housing, for everything, they are discriminating against him. That's why he's angry. So we need to, like what Gentleman's Factory is doing, we need to provide opportunities for him to advance. And even if not directly to him, let's empower the next leader that will directly, advance him, right? I mean, that's what it's about. That's why is he angry? That's why he's angry. He doesn't have the opportunities.
No, for sure. And then truth be told, I think that shout out to Android phones. Shout out to Android phones. That was an Android ringer right there. But yeah, like I'm seeing my phone, you know what I mean? No, but I think that in addition to though, right? I think that there needs to be a variety of different roles within our community. So it's important that we march and we protest, but then, there are some people that's not their skill set. Well, that's not where their value lends the greatest, right? There are some people who loves to broker deals, right? And if they're the deal broker, then they should be brokering deals at the highest level, right? There are some folks who just likes to rally up and then likes to just throw things. You're like, I'm not saying that they should, vandalize the community, but what I'm saying is that with that type of energy, they should surely, join the NFL, right? And they should be, advocating for us there. But in all seriousness, though, I think that it is important that everybody knows where their skill set is, how they provide the greatest value, and that they should then be advocating on our behalf in the lane that they so choose, because I grew up in Coney Island, right? Coney Island, Brooklyn. And, when I was, in my early 20s, I was the protester. I mean, like, y'all could look through my Facebook page and look through like the past 15 years ago. I was out there, marching, etc. Now, I mean, I still march periodically, but I'm not leading it because that's not where my value lends the greatest, right? My value is policy, right? It's bringing folks together, etc. So, like, I think that's like everybody should know what their true skill set is and then to lend it there. So, Michael asked a question.
But Jeff, I'm just going to add to that. But the missing link there is that you need a shared vision, though, right? Everyone needs to be on the same page with where we're going, and then they could see their role within that. That has also been a struggle within our community because we tend to be very fragmented by design. By the same systems that disenfranchise us, the same institutions, they separate us, and they do a really good job in the media to do that. So, but if you had enough critical mass of people that had a shared vision and a purpose, then they could see their role within that, whether you're the strategist or the marketing guy or the media guy or the politician or the revolutionary that's gonna, march on Washington, then that all makes sense. That all comes together.
Wow. I agree with you 1000%. So Michael asks, how do we reconcile with bootstrapping in the social equity era? On one hand, the status quo does need to die, but in the same breath, especially amongst the group of entrepreneurs, we use terms like grit, grind, self-determination, etc. Well, so yeah, like if I can touch that first, really good point, Michael. And I would say that with those terms of grit, grind, struggle, etc., it's also because we feel as though we need to have those qualities in order to survive in this world, right? So we are preaching, you gotta, right? You gotta be hard and you gotta be tough and but I think that for those who then make it, right, then they now have an obligation to just make it a little bit easier for the next generation. So, or not even the next generation, the person who is looking to, make it easier. So now, I'll use an example of, I don't know, Jay-Z, for example, right? I don't know the guy. So if anyone knows him here, and if I'm, like if y'all know him personally, and if he's a horrible person, don't tell me that, right? Because I love him, right? You know what I mean? But I'm using him as an example is if you're now seeing the doors, him going into high realms, but as you can now see just publicly, that his circle is also benefiting, right? And he's duplicated himself through perhaps a Kanye or a J. Cole or a Rihanna or etc., right? So now it's like as you're building that circle, building that army, then it's important that if now, because Jay-Z and Diddy is doing business with Diageo and with Moet Hennessy, etc., then now they should also open that pipeline so that it could be easier for the next generation. So like that's kind of how I see it. I mean, but Alan, what's your take?
Well, I think, just look at the example of Jeff Lindor, right? I mean, Jeff would not have been here today without that grind, without that grit. So I think you have to take it in context, right? Yeah. Because all Jeff does all day is grind and grit. Like seriously, like that's all he does all day. So it's a true statement, right? But you have to like, okay, yeah, but who are you but whose door are you knocking on? That's where it starts to be a challenge beyond repair, right? So what we're about, and why I appreciate this conversation with Jeff, and we talk like this all the time, how can we have a platform and a stage to allow us to work with each other and elevate each other, right? Without having to knock on somebody else's door. And a member said this maybe 6 months ago, let's stop knocking on doors. Let's decide who we let in to our building, and I think that's, I don't know. I don't think that's ever happened before in our history. I mean, it has somewhat, Tulsa, Oklahoma, but we know what happened there for various reasons. So strategically, we have to start looking ahead and thinking about, is there enough of us out there now with the knowledge, the capital, the wealth to start to solve problems for ourselves? And people still have to fight the fight of America needs to be the land of equality. People still need to fight that fight. But in parallel to that, we also need to build the capital, the wealth, the independence, right?
Right.
Because that's the only way. These things have to happen in parallel.
I heard a powerful quote by a pastor, and he said that if you do not define who you are, you will allow other people to define you. And when they define you, they'll use their own definition, right? So I think that, if we look at where our community is right now, right, the Black community, the brown community, right, and if we look at, I mean, obviously, when you look at the statistics, net net worth of a white household is about $30,000, and then the net worth of a Black household is about $11,000, right? Based upon the Pew Research Center and all of these different studies. So we know the data and we know where we are from a systematic standpoint. But then I would argue that we also need to look at where we are from the places of strength, right? From the places of culture, for the places of what we bring to the table, right? Because if we understand our strength, then we'll always lead from a place of strength and not necessarily from a place of weakness. Now, it's easier said than done, because if I don't have any money, and if I'm trying to reach to the next level, but I'm seeing that there's so many different barriers set in place. Now, to Michael, that's where the self-determination and the grit comes into play. But it is this balance, though, of yes, we know the current reality, but how do we then now, come together? Where if I'm thinking of elevation, and if Alan is thinking of elevation, and if Rustin is thinking of elevation, how can we use our skill sets so that we just don't go in this alone, but we go in this collectively, so that we right? So it's really, just understanding the power that you bring. Jay-Z said it best again, sorry for my second Jay-Z quote, right? Or like Jay-Z reference. But he said, we are culture. Nothing moves without us. We just give it away. Great. Alan, so question. So Adam, my man Adam, shout out to Adam from Utah, right? Shout out to Adam from Utah. Quick little story about Adam. Adam was there at Game 6 when Jordan beat the Utah Jazz, right? So when Jordan hit that last shot, that iconic shot, Alan's picture is on the on the screen, right? So I'm super jealous of Adam because I should have been there, man. You know what I mean? Anyway, so now Adam asks a question and he says, what are your thoughts on reparations?
So yeah, good question. I look. So let's play this out. We get it. Let's say we get it. Now what?
I'll answer it, right?
Every black person gets, I don't know, what would it be? Every black person in America gets what? $25,000, 50,000, 100,000.
25,000. What the hell am I doing with 25,000? Nah, every
I mean,
black
there's a lot more black people today than there was back then, right? So how would that equate to each black, like, how would the reparations show up is my question. So, dude, we get the money, but the institutions are still messed up. So what happens?
So let me answer it, right? So if like, I'm gonna use the perfect example. The other day I was on a call with another fund, and then they were saying, oh, you know what, like, how do we deploy capital to the black community, particularly the black businesses, right? And then someone on the call, a white person, right, says, hey, why are we going to give money to a black owned business in New York City that pre-COVID they were already struggling, right? And then if you would provide them the capital, wouldn't they continue to struggle? And my response to them was, well, they were struggling according to what you think struggling is pre-COVID because they were never properly funded, right? So if they're never really properly funded, then they're always going to be essentially running at a deficit, or they have to be, self-determined so that they could grind out because we're always, operating with less. So now my recommendation to them was, if you give, capital to these businesses that's unrestricted, what you're doing now is you're technically leveling off the playing field, because a lot of times these white companies, they have capital that it's unrestricted, and then they figure it out, right? You know what I'm saying? So I'm not saying that, you give everyone $250,000 and then everyone figures it out, because, with Dave Chappelle, when you look at what happened with Dave Chappelle with the Chappelle show on the skit where, black folks, got reparations, and then everyone just bought kind of like Escalades, right? You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying that, right? But what I am saying though is that, I'm not an expert on reparations. There's a lot of different variables. Who do you give it to? Do you give it to, Black Americans? Or like, what about the Black Caribbeans, right? What about them, right? So what about, Black immigrants? Do you give, you know what I'm saying? So, but I do think though that, there definitely needs to be cash infusions in all of our accounts. And if we then, blow it up on, Escalades, then, I mean, you know what I mean? but I mean, obviously, like, there's a lot of ways to deploy it, but, yeah.
Listen, man. So here's okay. Reparations, like, it depends on how that shows up. Okay, pay the loans off pay all the college loans off of all black people. Okay, okay, I can see that. Pay all the debt, pay all the credit card debt, pay off every black person's loan. Okay, that sounds really cool, but in another 2 years, we'll all be in the same debt because our minds have not shifted. So give everyone $200,000. We're gonna buy houses, we're gonna buy cars, we're gonna use white real estate companies, we're gonna so the money is just gonna go back outside. The money is just gonna leave the black community again. So the problem is much deeper than that, because bring back Black Wall Street and then give reparations, right? Then money will circle in our community, right? Black Wall Street in every major city, right? And so the problem is that we haven't been, we've never well, we have to get a little more acclimated to the black tax philosophies, the powernomics philosophies, so that when we do get the reparations, we support each other. Without that, without us changing that behavior, which has been, which we have been trained to think this way, it's not going to solve the problem. It'll be a checkbox for them, but for us, in 5 years, we'll just be back in the same situation.
Well, I think that yes, and also no, right? Because I think that there's a lot of really smart Black people that that could use it well. So, right. So, for example, if like I had $250,000, Alan had $250,000, Winston, Eves, Rustin, Sean, Isaiah, Diedrich, like, Al, we all like just put $250,000. If like $250,000 just like came in our account without us even, just out of nowhere, like Rustin can figure that joint out as to what we should be doing with it, right? Like meaning like I think that yes, I mean you're like totally right where it's important that we have these institutions set in play, but I would rather get the capital and then figure out what to do with it, as opposed to having all of the infrastructure and then the capital never comes. But so just some comments here, and then please like put in some more questions, man. This is fun. Okay, so Eves, right? Eves, man, Eves one of the smartest brothers I ever met. So Eves, he says, not necessarily cash infusions, clean slate on debts, preferential treatment in institutions of higher education, low interest loans, infusion of capital into businesses. Hallelujah. All right. So Sean says, regardless of what people do with the reparations, the money is owed. Absolutely. If someone owes you money, it's not up to them and how to spend it. I agree 1000%. Adam says, our housing expenses are probably our largest expense. If we were given our own land and housing, it would be a game changer. It would also help with homelessness. Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, so like there's so many different, variables and ramifications that we can come up with this, right? But I would say, give us some money and then we'll just figure it out. Now, Alan,
can I say something real quick? Okay, what if we never get reparations?
Right. Well, yeah. I mean,
do we just give up? I mean, so what I'm trying to say is like I mean, I'm not saying it shouldn't happen.
Right.
But what's the likelihood of that happening?
Well, so I would argue that the likelihood of anything happening is the unification of the community. So if the community tomorrow, and like just like how I said in the Yahoo interview, I said, hey, our community can't unlearn what we just experienced when everyone started protesting. So when we started protesting, all of the corporations was like, oh, I mean, right? They're like, you black person, you're promoted, right? And then they just put a press release out, right? Not like that, but you understand what I'm saying. So I think that once the community have a stronger unified voice, so many things can happen, because again, nothing can move without us, right? So my then, like, I guess next question, as we're thinking about this, like about the future and where is it that we should head, how should the next 50 years look like, right? What should our community be thinking as a collective in terms of, hey, futuristically, I would want my son or my daughter or myself, this is how I envision the community walking into, right? So what are your thoughts on that, man?
Man, so yeah, look, I think the next 50 years definitely it's going to continue to take generations to change the mindset. And I truly believe that for us to achieve equity, the majority of Americans that elect our politicians have to understand that we're in the 21st century, we're all human beings, and the institutions that were erected centuries ago need to be transformed, right? I mean, and that's a really big change for most people in America. I mean, we see what just happened with non-blacks that are protesting at White House. So, you know, it's pretty significant obstacles, right? But what we can do in the next 50 years is put for the people with again, not, and this is not for everybody, right? This is not for everybody. But what I'm saying is that we need the politicians and we need the people of color in office, you know, helping to drive policy and all that. But we also need to start to erect our own institutions. Let's use the technologies that are at our fingertips to start to service our own communities without having to rely on people that don't understand us to service us. These two things have to happen in parallel. Like we have for the last 50, 60 years have driven towards social integration, and that's great, and that's phenomenal, and that was successful, you know, in terms of our ability to gain the right to vote and to gain, you know, separate is not equal, you know, all that is great. But what we have to do now is with this community that we have right here, how can we use our talents? You know, we've leaned on the shoulders of our ancestors to get the education, to learn the craft and the tools, and some of us have built wealth.
Yep.
Let's invest that in erecting services and institutions that can solve the problems of our community the only way that we know how. And that has to be, somebody has to focus on that 100%. Otherwise, we're going to continue to have to ask for things.
Yep.
And I don't know, like, based on the way we're going with the pandemic and with the decimation of revenues and the government and services, we have to really move forward in a way where we can be self-sufficient.
Yep.
And that's going to take a minute, but I think we have enough talent and wealth within our community to do it.
Absolutely. And then what I would say to add to that, it's ownership, right? You know, it's about owning, it's about owning, it's about owning, it's about owning, it's about owning. And I'll use another example. And then this one isn't going to be about Jay-Z, right? But it's going to be about Tyler Perry. So when you look at Tyler Perry and when you look at Nick Cannon, right? So a couple of months ago, so both of them do business with CBS Viacom, right? But Nick Cannon is an employee of CBS Viacom, whereas Tyler Perry does business with CBS Viacom, right? You know, for which now, you know, Tyler Perry owns his content. He can go anywhere with it. I'm not really a big Tyler Perry fan. I mean, I tried to watch The Oval last night. Yo, that joint, you know what I'm saying? Ooh, Tyler Perry, please hire some writers, man. Oh my God. But like what I'm saying though is that Nick Cannon got fired by CBS Viacom. Tyler Perry, you know, has a business relationship with them, right? And now when you look at Tyler Perry's net worth in the, you know, and the wealth that he's accumulated, it was because he owned it, right? So, you know, what I would say for us is, yes, you know, it's important to get opportunities and to work at different corporations, etc. But it's also just as important to own either some real estate or a piece of real estate. doing a joint venture with folks in real estate, right? So it's also important to own your content or own equity in companies, right? Like these things are extremely important because if we're only just relying on, just our jobs or just, status quo, then we're going to continue to be, consumers and not producers, right? So the way that a community shifts and changes is when there are owners of it, because now they are at the table. Like, I'm gonna use my last Jay-Z quote, right? And Jay-Z in 444, he says, please don't die over the neighborhood that your mama's renting, right? And then that's the truth, so we got to make sure that we own. So what I would say with the next 50 years is unification of communities, right? So that our communities come together, places like the Gentleman's Factory and so many other organizations, bringing communities together so that we can have, conversations like this, so that we can continue to elevate our minds, but then that we can also work together from a collective standpoint. But then it's also where you park your money. Because if we're not putting your money in institutions that supports us, then we're going to continue to fund our demise, right? And I'm going to say that one more time, right? If we do not support the institutions or that supports us, if we don't know where we're putting our money, we're going to continue to fund our destruction. Alan, I'm gonna go to some of the more questions here because we are almost out of time, right? So Winston asks, how do you suppose Black businesses realistically put a value on our culture and build institutions to help distribute our talents? What do you mean by that, Winston? I'll read it again. How do you suppose Black businesses realistically put a value on our culture and build institutions to help distribute our talent? Okay, I'll get back to you on that one, Stan. And if Alan wants to add, but now going to the next question. Al says half of Blacks in America have zero or negative equity. There is a mentality shift, no income shift. Agreed. Al also wrote separately, how many people have ordered food in the last 6 months? How many people have used Eat Okra? Shout out to Eat Okra. You know what I'm saying? I use Eat Okra all the time. and Eat Okra, shout out to Anthony as well. He's been killing the game. And I appreciate a company like Eat Okra because now it makes finding Black restaurants simple, right? So it's very simple. So now, we now have to make a conscious effort to say, oh, like if we want to dine at a Black-owned restaurant, then sure, it's all on the Eat Okra app, right? And there's this like misconception of, oh my God, like if it's Black, then the quality is no, absolutely not. Like there's so many really great, organizations, restaurants, retail spaces, clothing lines, etc. Right? But now, if you think about this, right, if we were to put our money in our communities, do we really need VCs? Alan, my last question for you, right, is okay. So my question for you, Alan, is what do you think our community should do now? Like, where should we be thinking? Like, what should be the mentality shift that Al just stated, right? So how do we shift the trajectory of our mind as we continue to elevate?
Yeah, look, what we're trying, America has never been a place where there's been a racial equity. It's never happened. So we have to realize that this is really difficult to achieve. And what do you have around you at your fingertips? So, now more than ever, it's black and white in terms of the disparity, the gap, the discrimination, the racism that exists. There's still a lot of people that are denying that for obvious reasons. But we have to, this community right here alone could do so much. This 200 to 300 to 400 people that we have right now globally and across America, which is growing, if we just focus on this, it will exponentially expand and increase. Your families will benefit from that. Your friends will benefit from that. So this is going to be crawl, walk, run. Like crawl, walk, run, man. Right now, we're crawling, man. We're crawling. We're just realizing the power of this thing. And then soon we're going to start walking, and then we're going to start running. Like, so there's so many people within this community right here at Gentleman's Factory that have started businesses together, that have supported each other's businesses, that have conducted business with each other, that have traveled and flown out and hung out with each other. The potential of this is major. And it doesn't, whether we get reparations or not, it does not change the potential power of this community. And that's what we have to, yes, it's important to fight for the policies and the laws to be fair and equal, and criminal justice reform is horrendous. You know, like, dude, if I can't walk around and not feel safe and not get pulled over and not feel threatened, that's a problem. Like, you know, that's our liberty. Like, we should be able to move freely as American citizens. Like, yeah, we need to fight the hell out of that. But we also need to build, like, you know, and to Jeff's credit, let's build, man. And that, if we focus on that, and we have the people that have the technical skills and the marketing skills and the branding skills and the, you know, to start to, hey, man, I want to build my wealth. I want to purchase properties. I want to set my goals. I want to meet my goals. I want to, like, so this is the beauty of this community. And there's so much that we could do in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yep.
Regardless of what's happening outside of this circle.
That's a fact.
And there could be a global effect to that. You work with each other. The two of you guys in Harlem are working with each other, and then you wind up partnering with a guy in Nigeria or Johannesburg or Brazil. Dude, like, there's so much that could come out of this. That's amazing. That could be really a best practice and example for the world.
No, absolutely, man. So, you know, we only got a couple of more minutes. And Winston, shout out to Winston, because, man, I didn't know what the hell you was talking about before, man. But thank you for cleaning that up. Okay, so now Winston asks, how can we monetize our culture? What institutions do we demand from? Oh, sorry. How can we monetize our culture? What institutions do we demand equity from in America? Yeah, like, if I could take a quick stab at that, you know, monetizing our culture is making sure that we support the value in our culture, right? So the term support, you know, oftentimes we use it, but it's not necessarily support, because who you're supporting is bringing value to you, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's not necessarily support, it's you redirecting your dollar to value that enhances your community, right? So now so like, that's how I say, that's how we monetize our support. And then for the second question is, what institutions do we demand equity from in America? All of them. Nothing moves without us, man. But I think that, you know, we can always go back to history, but I think we also need to just focus on the present. and for you to know the value that you bring into every single room that you walk into, right? So now your presence is extremely valuable. You are extremely valuable. But if you don't know that, then you're going to give everything away at a huge discount because you don't really understand the true value that you bring. So what we should demand from equity, I mean, what we should demand from institutions is equality and fairness, because we're not here looking for handouts, right? I mean, we're looking for what is due, right? So and then there's a lot of things that's overdue, but let's not even focus so much on that. But let's also, but in addition to focusing on that, let's also focus on the future and what we can get out of this. Alan, last question from Winston is: what happens when we own the institutions, but there's no buy-in from the community?
Well, I mean, I don't see how that could ever happen if you do it right. And that's why we're here.
It's a fact.
What needs are you meeting? Who's your target market? What problem are you solving? I mean, this is everything we preach every day here at GF. So the reason why you would own the institution is because the community has a demand that you're meeting. And that's why you would own the institution in the first place. So there should be no reason why you own the institution and the community doesn't want your services.
Right.
If you do it right.
That's a fact. That's a fact. Yeah, like, and then to piggyback off that, like, I think that at Gentleman's Factory, and the way that I started it and built it, it was just listening to what the community needed, right? And then being very sensitive to that, extremely sensitive. So that's how, with Gentleman's Factory, we have a wide variety of gentlemen at all stages in life, right? We have, gentlemen that went to the Harvards, the Yales, and fancy people like Alan, who went to the University of Michigan, and I started out in community college, right? Shout out to Kingsborough Community College, everyone, right? You know what I'm saying? So it's a but I say that to say that once you listen to what the needs of the community is, and are very sensitive to that, and solving specific problems, then then the community will come, right? So it's being, really keen on that, man. But wow, man.
And
Alan, man.
Also, I just want to give a shout out to, what Jeff always says, we should not have to grow in isolation. So I'm just saying that question, there's an underpinning in there. Like, if you don't build that institution in isolation, there should not be any reason why the community doesn't want it.
That's a fact. Yep.
Right. So we need to continue to work together, to build together, and there should be no reason why there's not a market out there for what you're offering.
Yep. Oh man, Alan, man, any last as we have, about less than a minute left, man. Any last thoughts?
Man, look, I'm just happy to be here, bro. Like, I'm so excited to be working with you on this. And you always call out these fancy institutions, whatever, But look, my parents were, middle class. Mom was a nurse, dad was a social worker, and they just ingrained in me education, go out it, get it, whatever you want. And I went to these things. So, and I'm happy to now be here where I could work with you, Jeff, to really leverage all the training I received from corporate America for 25 years to change the status quo, bro. Like, that's it. That's what this is about for our future, for the next 50 years. I'm here, bro. Like, so I'm really happy that we had this conversation and this dialogue.
Oh man, let's do it, man. Alan, man, thank you so much, man. We appreciate you, man. So Oh man, so everyone else, man, have a good night, man. This was a really great combo, man. And feel free to reach out to us via Slack or, let's continue building, man. This was really great, man. And then let this conversation continue to live on because, there's so many great things that Gentleman's Factory is doing, but also our community as a whole. And always know that, you as an individual have the ability to affect change. But if you as an individual, bring a community and a collective with you, then we can move a mountain, right? So let's continue building, man. And fellas, have a good night. See you all soon, man. All right. Alan, thanks, man. All right.